Hi everyone, my name is Varun. I'm part of the Cloudera product marketing team, and with me today I have Santiago and Robert. And we'll be talking about a topic that nobody is discussing, AI and ML, but we'll talk about it from our perspective and what we are seeing in the industry today. So to start things off, I have one question for both of you. What are the hottest AI and ML use cases that you see in the industry right now?
Thanks, Varun. I think that's a really good question. I think across every single industry in the entire world, we're seeing a proliferation of large language models and AI really take the world by storm. Specifically in some of the major industries such as banking, we've seen things like customer success, things like fraud detection, automation of different kinds of processes really separate the leaders from the followers. Specifically in places like APAC, China, where things like AWS and Azure don't really exist, the ability to do this on premises has become really, really important. And a lot of organizations have really differentiated themselves by being able to bring those cloud native environments to produce large language model solutions directly into their ecosystems. Thoughts, Robert?
Absolutely. I mean, so you're mentioning one use case, finance, banking, but really, I would go, it's applicable to every industry, right? To every vertical. Manufacturing, right, healthcare. All of these industries are being proliferated and have applications to it, by basically applying those language models to their data sets to be able to extract a lot of value. For example, summarization. We have customers who've been able to increase, their efficiency by 95%, basically not having to manually summarize these documents and have these models being infused. I think the biggest probably is code completion or code suggestion, where you have these models give you the ability to be a much more efficient programmer and developer. We have numbers such as 20% increased efficiency, which is huge if you have thousands of developers. And I think these are some of the use cases that are probably the hottest right now. So it's like, one, can I become more creative? Can you help me look at all my documents and quickly summarize them? Can I get the insights quickly? And then two, can you help me build things, right? So the development, that whole paradigm. I think those are some of the biggest use cases that we're seeing right now across multiple verticals.
Yeah, I'll also add, I think that, we're talking a lot about external use cases, which I think are really important. But I think that just one of the biggest use cases that I'm seeing across the board has to do with how you enable internal teams that maybe aren't data scientists or technical professionals. How do you give them access to that data in a way that makes sense for them? And that's accelerating productivity inside of almost every sector and every business across the world.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the unique approach that we have is, we're seeing all these different solutions being developed by, some of the larger companies, the really big names. But what we're trying to do is how do you do this internally, right? How do you actually train these models internally? Or more specifically, because training is the most expensive process. So instead of training, how do you take these models that already been trained for you, and then, for example, how do you fine tune them, right? How do you provide that real-time context for these models so then they can actually answer the questions that are most relevant to you, to the data that you actually have, internally been building over many, many years now.
So the follow-up question would be that in the last 12 months or so, I think most companies now are looking to adopt more and more AI, specifically around LLM. What are the biggest challenges that you are seeing that companies face?
Yeah, the White House recently released essentially a statement or a mandate around where we should be going with AI. And I think that that's very indicative of a lot of the challenges that these organizations are having. Primarily, I think it's trust and security and governance. So as everybody will know that has used something like a ChatGPT, hallucinations inside of these models are absolutely real. Mm-hmm. And a hallucination inside of your business can create significant problems across the board, no matter who you are or what you're doing. It can lead to inefficiencies or even losses of millions and millions of dollars. So that's one. The second challenge that I see is around the security and privacy, of course, as I mentioned. So making external calls or working with a third party that could be, for example, training additional large language models from your data, that can be a non-starter, especially for businesses that are dealing with very sensitive data, customer information, personally identifiable information. And those are very real concerns. But I do think that luckily there are ways of managing those problems and dealing with them. And that's a lot of the work that we've been doing here at Cloudera is how do you create trusted AI for the enterprise that actually solves problems for you in a trusted way?
100%. And I think, to add to that, like we've been building our platform for years now that allows that not only safe and secure ingest of all the data, but then go through all the different components from real-time data ingestion, data wrangling, visualizing, prepping the data so that then you actually have the data sets that you can rely on and see who's been manipulating those data sets, who had access to them, so then you can, in the end, build a trusted AI. And I think the other part to that question that you've asked, Varun, is what are the biggest challenges? Well, on top of the security and the governance piece, it's actually how do we bring these applications, how do we actually bring those models to production, right? So producing the models, bring the models that actually understand the context, that can deliver results, models that are valuable to our businesses. That's probably one of the biggest challenges right now, because everybody's sort of still, in many ways, staying on a silence and trying to figure out what is the infrastructure that we're trying to implement. How do we manage the costs? Do we actually invest in thousands of GPUs on-prem to produce similar results to the likes of OpenAI, Anthropic, and so forth? That's probably some of the other challenges that also a lot of all of the CEOs and CIOs and everybody else is asking themselves, like, how do we address that particular space?
And it's a hardware problem. It's a cloud problem. It's a universal problem in terms of how you get these things done. So I completely agree.
Yep.
So safe to say that trusted data is important because trusted data or trustworthy data leads to trustworthy AI.
Absolutely. I think it starts with data, right? Everything starts and ends with data. And we tend to think of large language models, ChatGPT, all these things as kind of the end all of how we're going to be working with data moving forward. And in a lot of ways, it's not wrong. But that being said, it's also really not the end all, because we've gone through phases of how we process information and how we use information. Think from the days of MapReduce to Spark to where we are today with large language models. In 2 or 3 years, there's going to be something else. And while we don't know what that is, we need to always be able to embrace that change moving forward. But the common denominator and the common factor is always the data, trusting that data, and being able to essentially use that data in the most effective, streamlined way to adapt to the changing paradigms.
Okay. So a question would be, what is Cloudera doing today to help customers get to LLM or trustworthy AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of our approach is we're looking at some of our customers, what they have done with our machine learning service today. What have they implemented? And we've seen multiple approaches to solving it. And what we want to do internally is make sure that our customers can rapidly replicate the best use cases and have that architecture be ready essentially from day one. So what we have is basically these AI application prototypes that with a few clicks and a few minutes, you can have them spin up and be ready to demonstrate all these powerful language models. Of course, everybody starts from prompt engineering, but the next step would be naturally, how do I add a contextual database to it, such as a vector store, right? Or the RAG architecture, as more technically known. And so we have applied AI prototypes, so we can rapidly get that going and then add your contextual data to demonstrate internally, like this actually may work out. This may produce results that are available rapidly, and we can replicate something like that and build it internally. Let's choose the model, let's bring the data, and we have a working prototype, and now we can, we can take the next step and produce it. We have prototypes that allow you to fine-tune your models. So of course, that's a more natural step. You can bring a much larger model, and then you fine-tune certain pieces for specific use cases, finance, chatbots, document summarization, code completion, and so forth. Those are very powerful techniques that we enable with these prototypes. And again, you can quickly spin those up. If you need an external vector store, we have applied prototype where it integrates with the Pinecone database and brings in information in real time with our Dataflow product. If you need to integrate with Amazon Bedrock, we have an applied prototype doing just that. So we have a lot of those examples that allow our customers to very quickly, rapidly spin out those mini demos essentially, and then bring the necessary data and have these powerful models already running internally, have the demos experiment, test them out, and then once they make the decision, you can quickly make your products out of these.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it is that we've really tackled many different approaches to it. So you mentioned retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. That's really a low barrier of entry to allow you to use your own knowledge base in order to basically contextualize a large language model to answer specific questions that are relevant to your business. It's one of the ways that we eliminate hallucinations, for example. But then let's say that you have a more complex use case, like you want to automate the generation of SQL or SQL, or you want to do code completion or code review. We actually can do that by using fine tuning inside of these large language models with adapters that wrap around them. And as Robert already noted, our applied machine learning AI prototypes, they ship with everything that you need to have almost 80% completion. It ships with a complete application that you can adopt for your own use cases. And it really makes it so you plug and play your data and parameters and change it specific to your business. But instead of starting from scratch where there can be lots of errors, all those best practices are baked in.
All right, this has been super insightful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Varun.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.